Mara had always believed that calm nights carried their own kind of truth. There was nothing loud about them. Nothing dramatic. Just the stillness that revealed what daylight sometimes hid. It was early evening when it happened. The sky outside their home had slipped into that soft blue just before darkness. Her husband, Daniel, was in the kitchen preparing tea, humming the same gentle tune he always did when he wanted to pretend everything was fine. Mara knew him too well. He hummed only when he was troubled. And that night, he hummed more than usual. She was about to ask him what was wrong when someone knocked. Not a quick knock. Not a nervous one either. It was slow. Firm. The kind that made you straighten your back without knowing why. Daniel paused. Mara, that must be him. She frowned. Who? He wiped his hands on a towel, took a breath, and said, my mentor. Professor Alden. Mara blinked. She had heard about the professor for years. Daniel admired him deeply, respected him more than almost anyone. But he rarely visited. And never unannounced. Before she could ask anything more, Daniel went to open the door. Professor Alden stood on the front step, his tall frame slightly hunched, as if he carried something heavy on his shoulders that wasn't entirely physical. His silver hair was messier than usual. His eyes warm but tired. Mara, the professor said softly. May I speak with you? Alone? Her breath caught. Daniel looked between them, confused, maybe even worried, but he stepped aside. Of course, Mara said, trying to keep her voice steady. The professor walked into the living room and waited until she sat across from him. The air between them felt tight, like a quiet storm trapped inside four walls. I know this is unusual, he began. But I wanted to speak to you directly. Not because Daniel has done anything wrong. And not because I mean to worry you. His voice trembled slightly, and that alone surprised her. He was a man who spoke like he carried answers to every question. Tonight, he sounded like he barely held one. Mara leaned forward. Professor, is everything all right? He gave a faint smile. That depends on how you define all right. I've been watching Daniel these past few weeks. His work, his spirit, something's shifted. She felt her throat tighten. She had sensed it too. The late nights. The silence he brushed off as tiredness. The way he distracted himself with chores or small talk. I've tried asking him, she whispered. He says he's fine. I know, Professor Alden replied gently. And I know why he says it. She clutched her hands together. The room suddenly felt too quiet. Mara, the professor continued, Daniel is facing something he doesn't want to burden you with. Something he believes he must handle alone. Her heart dropped. What is it? He hesitated. For a long moment. Before I tell you, he said softly, I need you to understand that everything I say comes from care. For both of you. Mara nodded, though her chest felt tight. Professor Alden reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. It was sealed. Old-fashioned. The paper slightly worn as if it had been handled too many times. He placed it gently on the coffee table. This, he said, is something Daniel has been struggling with for weeks. He asked me for guidance, but I believe the answers he needs cannot come from me. Mara stared at the envelope. Her fingertips tingled. Everything in her body told her not to touch it, but everything in her heart begged her to. What's inside? She whispered. The professor stood up slowly, his expression soft but urgent. That is for Daniel to tell you. But he won't, unless you ask him with the kind of patience only you can offer. She swallowed hard. Should I be afraid? He paused at the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim evening light. Not afraid, he said quietly. But prepared. Her breath shivered. Prepared for what? The professor then added something so unexpected, Mara felt the room tilt for a second. And Mara, he needs you now more than he ever has before. She sat frozen as he stepped toward the door. Daniel was in the hallway, watching, worry written all over his face. Before leaving, Professor Alden turned back and said gently, Please take care of him tonight. Then he stepped out into the cool night air. The door clicked shut, leaving Mara with a sealed envelope on the table, and a husband whose eyes held a fear he tried so hard to hide. She looked at Daniel. He looked at her. And the silence between them felt like the beginning of something neither of them fully understood. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Mara finally reached for the envelope. And Daniel whispered her name in a trembling voice that made her stop. Daniel stood by the doorway, not moving, not speaking, just watching her with eyes that carried far too much hurt for one quiet evening. Mara held the envelope gently. It felt heavier than paper should ever feel. "Daniel," she said softly, "why didn't you tell me?" He looked down at the floor like he was afraid of what he might see in her expression. "I didn't want to trouble you." Her chest tightened. "You're my husband. Your troubles are not something you carry alone." He closed his eyes for a moment as if her words both comforted and hurt him at the same time. "Mara," he whispered, "I was trying to protect you." She studied him carefully. His shoulders seemed tense. His voice quieter than usual. His hands restless, opening and closing like he didn't know where to place them. The professor's warning echoed in her mind. "He needs you now more than he ever has before." Mara breathed in slowly. Then she placed the envelope gently on the table. "I won't open it," she said. "Not unless you want me to." Daniel's head lifted instantly. Surprise flickered across his face. You're not going to look." "I don't want a secret to speak louder than you," she said quietly. "If something is hurting you, I want to hear it from you. Not from a piece of paper." His breath shook. Just a little. Barely noticeable, unless you knew him as well as she did. Daniel walked slowly to the sofa and sat beside her. Not too close. Not too far. Like a man unsure of what he still deserved. "Mara, I've been overwhelmed," he finally said. "With work, with expectations, with everything I've been trying to become." His voice broke on the last word. She moved closer, placing a hand gently on his arm. "And you felt you had to do it all alone." He nodded, eyes glassy with emotion he fought to hide. "I didn't want you to think less of me," he whispered. "Or think I'm failing. You believe in me so much. I didn't want to disappoint you." Her heart ached at the sincerity in his tone. "Daniel," she said softly, "believing in you doesn't mean expecting you to be perfect. It means walking with you when things feel too heavy." He swallowed hard. "You're stronger than me." "That isn't true," she replied gently. "I just refuse to let fear make your decisions." Daniel looked away, then at the envelope, then back at her. "I didn't write what's inside," he said finally. "It's from someone else." Her breath stilled. "Who?" He hesitated. "Mara, do you remember the project I was leading earlier this year? The one that kept me away most evenings?" She nodded. "Those months were difficult." He came home tired, quieter, distant in a way she couldn't name. "There were disagreements," he continued. "Pressure. Some people weren't happy with the direction I chose." She listened closely. He was speaking like a man peeling back layers he'd hidden for too long. "One of the team members filed a complaint," Daniel said quietly. "Not about anything terrible, but about my leadership, my choices, and how I handled certain decisions." Her eyebrows knit gently. "That's not unusual. People disagree. That's normal." "It would be normal," he said softly, "if the complaint didn't gain attention beyond the team." Mara stared at him. "How far did it go?" Daniel exhaled shakily. "It reached the review board." Her heart sank. She reached for his hand. "Daniel, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought I could fix it before it grew," he said. "I didn't want you carrying my stress. I didn't want my problems to become our problems." She shook her head gently. "They already are ours. That's what marriage is." He looked like he might finally believe her, just a little. "What's in the envelope?" she asked again, softly. Daniel closed his eyes. "A letter," he said. "From the board. It's my official notice of evaluation." Mara felt the air shift. An evaluation could mean many things. Some mild. Some serious. He continued, voice trembling now. "And the reason Professor Alden gave it to you is because he thinks I need you to read it with me. Not alone. Not when I've shut myself into fear." Her heart softened even more. "Then we'll read it together," she said. Whenever you're ready. Daniel opened his eyes. They were filled with a mix of fear and relief. The kind that lived in someone who had been carrying too much for too long. He nodded slowly. Tonight, he whispered. I think I need courage tonight. Mara squeezed his hand. Then tonight you're not facing it alone. He exhaled, shaky but real, like a man finally letting air reach parts of himself he'd kept buried. She reached for the envelope again. This time, Daniel didn't stop her. But just as she slid her finger under the flap, there was another knock at the door. A soft, hesitant knock. One that made both of them freeze. Daniel's hand tightened around hers. He wasn't ready for more surprises. Not tonight. Mara rose slowly from the sofa. The envelope remained unopened on the table, its edges catching a small strip of lamplight, almost as if it were watching them. Daniel didn't move. His eyes followed her with worry wrapped around every breath. It's all right, she whispered. But even she wasn't entirely sure. She walked to the door and paused. The knock had been gentle, almost uncertain. Not like the professor's earlier knock. This one felt different, quieter, but no less unsettling. Mara opened the door only halfway. Standing on the porch was a young woman she didn't recognize. She appeared to be a few years younger than Daniel. Dark hair tied back neatly. Eyes soft but anxious, as if she had practiced courage on the walkover. Hello, the woman said, her voice wavering. I'm so sorry for coming unannounced. I hope I'm not intruding. Mara offered a polite but cautious smile. Not at all. Can I help you? The woman clasped her hands tightly in front of her. I'm here to see Daniel. Mara's heart lifted slightly in confusion. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Daniel approached slowly. When he saw the woman, his expression changed, not shock, not anger, but something more complicated. Mara, he murmured, this is Ilara. She worked with me on the project. Ilara nodded with an apologetic smile. Yes. And I know this is not the best time, but I needed to speak with you both. Mara felt a small knot form in her stomach. Ilara's tone was gentle, but the timing, the urgency, something wasn't right. Please, Ilara continued softly, may I come in for a moment? Mara glanced at Daniel. His shoulders had tensed again, and he looked like he was deciding between fear and responsibility. After a long second, Daniel nodded. Mara stepped aside, and Ilara entered the living room. Her eyes paused briefly on the envelope on the table, then flicked away politely, as if she already knew exactly what it was. They all sat, though the room felt far too quiet for comfort. Ilara twisted her fingers together before speaking. I know the evaluation letter arrived today, she began gently. I shouldn't know that, but I do. Daniel closed his eyes, a sigh slipping out as if he had expected this. Mara waited, listening closely. Ilara continued, her voice calm but carrying a hint of guilt. The complaint filed earlier this year. I'm the one who submitted it. Mara's breath stilled. Daniel kept his head down. Not out of shame, but out of the exhaustion that comes from facing a truth twice in one evening. Ilara swallowed, her own eyes shining with emotion she kept tightly controlled. I need to explain, she said softly. I never meant for things to escalate this far. I wasn't trying to harm Daniel's reputation. I wasn't trying to threaten his position. I felt unheard. And instead of speaking to him directly, I made it official. Mara leaned forward slightly. What happened? Ilara nodded slowly, as if she had rehearsed this moment, every word chosen carefully. There were disagreements in the project, she said. Daniel made decisions I didn't agree with. At the time, I felt overlooked. Frustrated. And instead of resolving it through conversation, I reacted out of emotion. She looked at Daniel, regret softening her features. You were under pressure. I see that now. And you were carrying far more than anyone realized. Daniel lifted his gaze, tired but attentive. Ilara, he murmured, why are you telling us this now? She hesitated. Then her voice lowered to a fragile honesty. Because, once I saw how serious the board was taking the complaint, I knew I had to do something. I knew I had to be responsible for the consequences of my choices. A small silence settled over the room. Mara's heart softened, though she kept her expression steady. "What are you hoping to do?" she asked gently. Ilara exhaled shakily. "I've submitted an amendment," she said. "A written clarification. I explained that my complaint wasn't about misconduct or anything harmful. It was about frustration and poor communication. I told them you were fair, Daniel. And that I was overwhelmed in my own way." Daniel blinked, stunned. You did that?" "Yes," she whispered. "And I came here tonight because I didn't want you both living in uncertainty or fear because of something I caused." She looked down at her hands again. "I'm truly sorry. I can't undo everything, but I wanted to be honest." Mara exchanged a glance with Daniel. His expression softened, not fully relieved, not fully calm, but different. A little lighter. "Thank you for telling us," Mara said gently. Ilara nodded, eyes soft. "I'll leave you two now. I just needed you to hear it from me." She stood, offering a timid smile before heading toward the door. But before she stepped outside, she turned back. "Oh, and Daniel. The board meets in 2 days. Whatever happens, you're not alone in this anymore." Then she slipped out into the night. Mara walked back to the sofa, her heart beating in a strange rhythm between hope and worry. Daniel sank down beside her. The envelope still sat on the table. Silent. Waiting. Mara reached for his hand again. "Are you ready?" she whispered. Daniel looked at her, emotion pooling in his eyes. "I think," he said quietly, "I need to be." But as she touched the envelope, he gently placed his hand over hers and whispered words that froze her in place. "Mara, there's something else you don't know." Mara slowly set the envelope back onto the table. Her hand trembled only slightly, but her breath caught in her chest. "Daniel," she whispered, "what do you mean?" He sat forward, elbows on his knees, fingers touching his forehead the way he always did when he was trying to hold himself together. "There's more to the evaluation," he said quietly. "It's not just about the complaint. It's about what happened afterward." Mara eased beside him, her hand resting gently on his back. "I'm listening. You don't have to hide anything from me." He turned toward her, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and exhaustion. "After the complaint was filed," he said softly, "the board asked me to provide a detailed account of the project's challenges. But instead of being honest about everything, I left something out." Mara blinked gently. "What did you leave out?" He swallowed hard. "My own mistake," he murmured. "One I didn't want anyone to see." Her heart softened instantly, not out of worry, but out of love. "Everyone makes mistakes," she said. "Whatever it is, we'll face it." Daniel shook his head slowly. "This mistake affected the project timeline. It caused delays I didn't want to admit were my fault. I pushed myself harder. I stayed late. I tried to fix everything without telling anyone, but things only grew worse." Mara listened carefully. His voice trembled only slightly, but that tremble spoke louder than any detail. "I should have been upfront," he whispered. "But I was afraid of disappointing everyone, my team, the board, Professor Alden, and, most of all, you." She took his hands gently in hers. "Daniel," she said softly, "you don't have to be flawless for me. You never have." He let out a shaky breath. "I know. But my pride got in the way. And now the board might see the missing information as a lack of transparency." Mara felt her heart rise to her throat. "Is that why you were so worried these past weeks?" He nodded. "Yes." The truth seemed too heavy to say out loud. She squeezed his hands. "But the truth is always lighter when it's shared." Daniel closed his eyes, leaning into her touch for a moment. The weight he carried felt real now, not imagined, not exaggerated, real. And yet, in the room's soft lamplight, it didn't feel impossible. "Do you think the board will understand?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. Mara took a breath, steady and warm. "I think honesty will matter. And your integrity matters. You're not the kind of person who hides things out of selfishness. You were trying to protect people." He opened his eyes, the emotion in them gentler now. "Mara, I don't deserve you." She smiled softly. "You deserve understanding. You deserve grace. You deserve someone who stands beside you when life gets complicated. And I'm here. I always will be. He leaned into her, forehead resting lightly against her temple, as if drawing strength from her presence. For a moment, everything was quiet. Even peaceful. Then Mara pulled back slightly. Let's open the envelope together, she whispered. Daniel inhaled deeply, then nodded. She reached for the envelope again, the paper cool under her fingertips. This time, when she lifted it, Daniel didn't hesitate. But just before she unfolded the letter inside, Daniel rested a hand on hers again. One more thing, he said softly. And this one, it's not about the board. Mara froze, the letter half open. What is it? She asked gently. Daniel looked at her with a gaze she had seen only a handful of times, raw, vulnerable, without a single wall left standing. I haven't slept well in months, he confessed. Not because of fear, but because I felt like I was losing myself. And I didn't know how to tell you. Her breath softened. Losing yourself how? He swallowed. Like I couldn't recognize the person I was becoming. I felt distant from my own hopes. I worried that if you saw me like that, you'd see me as weak. Her heart squeezed. Daniel, she said tenderly, you could never disappoint me by being human. He closed his eyes, tears gathering but not falling. I just didn't want you to look at me and see someone breaking. Mara cupped his cheek gently. Then look at me now, she whispered. Tell me, do I look disappointed? Or do I look like someone who loves you? His breath shook. You look like home, he whispered. They sat together quietly, the letter still in her hand, their hearts finally speaking truths they had both held too long. Whenever you're ready, she said again. Daniel nodded carefully. I'm ready now. She unfolded the letter slowly. The paper crackled softly in the quiet room. But before she could begin reading, her eyes caught the first line. And something about it made her heart drop suddenly, sharply, like a stone falling into deep water. She glanced at Daniel. Daniel stared back. Mara, what does it say? He asked, voice trembling. Her lips parted, but the words refused to come. Because the letter didn't begin with a neutral greeting. It didn't begin with a standard evaluation opening. It began with a formal notice, one that changed everything. Daniel leaned closer, worry rising in his eyes. Mara, what does it say? She finally found her voice. It starts with, notice of temporary suspension. Daniel's breath caught. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a small, painful sound that revealed the depth of what he had been fearing. He sat back slowly, eyes fixed on the floor. A suspension, he whispered. So they really lost trust in me. Mara reached for his hand instantly. Daniel, wait. Keep reading. He hesitated, then nodded. Mara continued scanning the letter, her voice soft but steady. It says the suspension is not permanent. It's pending review of the updated documentation. The board wants a full, honest, detailed explanation of the delays and the project decisions before they finalize anything. Daniel exhaled shakily. So there's still a chance. There's more, Mara said, eyes moving down the page. It says that your reputation for integrity is why they're giving you an opportunity to clarify. Daniel blinked. My reputation helped? Yes. She squeezed his hand. It says you have previously demonstrated honesty and commitment. They want clarity, not punishment. A slow, trembling breath left his chest. I thought they only saw my mistakes. They see the whole of you, she whispered. Not just the hard moments. Daniel sat silently for a moment, absorbing every word. Then Mara continued reading. It says the amended statement from Alara has been received and will be considered. Daniel's head lifted slightly. She really did try to fix things, he murmured. She did, Mara said. And now the board wants truth. Nothing else. He nodded, the fear in his eyes shifting into something quieter. Not hope, not yet, something gentler. Something steadier. Mara finished reading, then folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table. Silence filled the room. A deep, honest kind of silence. Daniel rubbed his hands together slowly. I don't know what's going to happen, he admitted. I don't know if they'll restore everything, or if I'll have to rebuild from the ground up. Mara moved closer, her shoulder brushing his. Then we'll rebuild, she said softly. Together. He looked at her, eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. Mara, how are you so calm? She smiled, small and warm. Because I know you, she said gently. I know your heart. I know the kind of man you are. A mistake doesn't erase that. Daniel's throat tightened. I kept everything inside. I shouldn't have. She brushed her thumb lightly across his knuckles. You carried it alone because you thought that was strength. But strength isn't silence, Daniel. Strength is trust. Strength is allowing someone to stand beside you. He closed his eyes, letting her words sink in. When he opened them again, they were gentle in a way she hadn't seen in months. I'm sorry, he whispered. For shutting you out. I'm here, she said. That's what matters. He leaned closer, forehead touching hers, their breaths soft and steady. I don't deserve you, he murmured again. You do, she replied. You always have. They stayed like that for a while, the quiet kind of togetherness that didn't need words. Finally, Daniel pulled back slightly. What should I do now? Mara smiled softly. You should write your full account, she said. Be honest. Be clear. And let the board see the real you, the hardworking, earnest, thoughtful man I married. He let out a small, relieved breath. I can do that. I know, she said. And I'll help you. We'll work on it together tonight. Daniel took her hand, holding it like an anchor. Thank you, he whispered. You don't have to thank me, she replied. Loving you is not a task. It's a choice I make every day. His eyes softened. And I choose you every day too. The room felt warmer then. Safer. A place where fear couldn't grow the way it had before. Daniel stood, gently pulling Mara up with him. I think I'm ready, he said quietly. She nodded. Then let's begin. They walked to the small desk in the corner of their living room. Daniel opened his notebook. Mara sat beside him. And together, slowly, honestly, they began writing the truth he had been afraid to face alone. Hours later, after the letter was complete and their hearts felt lighter, Daniel looked at Mara with a soft, grateful smile. Whatever happens, he said, I feel like I found myself again tonight. She cupped his cheek gently. You never truly lost yourself, she whispered. You just forgot to look in the mirror. Daniel rested his forehead against hers once more, the quiet of night wrapping around them like a promise. In that moment, surrounded by unfinished worries and uncertain answers, something felt clear. Love didn't remove challenges. But it made them bearable. And it made them shared. And for the first time in months, Daniel didn't feel alone.